It finally happened. For the first time in 24 years, one person holds every record in Mario Kart 64. The road to this monumental achievement was filled with intense battles and new discoveries that led to the biggest record frenzy since the game's release. It wasn't all grit and determination. Along the way, there were new strategies and game-breaking tech that contributed to one player holding all of the records. This is the story of Mario Kart 64's first perfect champion. I'd like to preface this by acknowledging that some of you will be upset about the hoarding, and I do understand your frustrations, but for this video, we will be looking at the timeline of records and the strat discoveries that went into this achievement. The hoarding was covered in my previous documentary, so if you're just hearing about it or want more information, please go watch the final chapter of that video. With that out of the way, let's dive into it. So what does it take to be champion? The distinguished title of champ in Mario Kart 64 is awarded to the player that generally has the most world records, with some variations. It's calculated by an equation that factors in your total number of world records and your average finish on tracks, which makes it possible to have fewer records but still be champ in some cases. Back in late 2020, there were two players battling for the title, Matthias and Dan Burbank. Matthias would take the title back after the hoarding and would hold onto it for almost 200 days, but Dan slowly built up records and laid claim to it once again. This was Dan's longest reign during that period, which started on January 7th, 2021, and the battle raged as expected, with each player grinding tracks for small optimizations across the many turns and jumps. But all of that would change on March 14th, 2021. Back in the early 2000s, there was a record submitted by Troy Ullman on Luigi Raceway that had what the community called the mystery boost. As Troy popped a shroom for the final off-road corner, something bizarre happened. Despite following the same path as his ghost, he managed to gain a significant amount of time. So the question became, how? This wouldn't be answered for almost 20 years, but on March 14th, 2021, Drew Weatherton and Forest64 released a video that explained precisely what was going on, and it all stemmed from an accidental discovery. On February 20th, a custom Mario Kart track designer by the name of Deadhamster posted in the Discord that he found something that he doubted a use would ever be found for. While driving on a custom track, he jumped to a section that was supposed to be marked as off-road. Upon landing, two things were noticeable. The first is that his speed wasn't reduced, and the second is that the particles from the tires being off-road were not being kicked up. It was from this event that Forrest and Weatherton based their investigation, and with some help from Micro 500, they discovered that the particles and the speed not being reduced were actually the same thing. As you touch different sections of track, the game adds a value to each tire based on what type of ground it's touching, and depending on what terrain it's in contact with, the speed of that tire is altered, which affects the overall speed of the kart. The hitbox of each tire is offset slightly from that of the kart. This means that if you get close to a wall, you can have the tire clip through, and since there's nothing on the other side, the tire is marked as touching nothing, as the game thinks it's above the water below the track. This state is referred to as null tires, and while it's active, the tires affected will ignore the terrain they're on and stop kicking up particles when on off-road surfaces. It doesn't last forever, as once you jump to start a mini-turbo or drive over uneven ground, the tires will be marked properly again. So what did this discovery mean for non-shortcut time trials? Runners were aware that it could happen on certain tracks before Weatherton's video. It just added a better understanding of what was happening. While null tires does add some time save to a few tracks, it wasn't the biggest strategy that the video revealed. For that, we need to look at Bowser's Castle. While looking for an application of null tires, they found that it could happen over the bridge, but the position required was so precise that it wasn't thought to be viable. Instead, they discovered a new strat for maintaining speed around corners while doing a mini-turbo, so it's time we explained the most utilized mechanic in the game. Mini turbos occur by doing a jump, then toggling the control stick to one side so you can build up a speed boost that is released when you stop the drift. You know when to release it based on the color of the smoke coming from your tires, and it adds about 10 units to your max speed until it wears off. When taking a mini turbo around a sharp corner, you will lose some speed due to the angle of the turn, but Weatherton and Forrest found a new method to preserve speed. If you jump when the mini turbo boost is applied going around a corner, it will delay that speed loss and turn you sharper, and if you start another mini turbo from that jump, you can nullify the speed loss even further. For Bowser's Castle, there are 6 spots on the F-lap and 18 on the 3-lap for the corner jump, but it's not the only thing Weatherton found. He discovered a new way of doing the stair section. In previous runs, it was believed that driving down the stairs was the fastest method, but by jumping from the second stair, you move faster than just driving down them. Directly after the stairs, he also found a better spot to use the second shroom on the F-lap that saved 0.2 of a second, and in time trials, that's the equivalent of finding a major skip. These discoveries had big implications on Bowser's Castle, and once the video was released on March 14th, it only took a couple of days for the first records to roll in. So let's start with the F-lap. Dan had set the F-lap record the previous month with a 43:15, and just 3 days after Weatherton's video, Matthias would tie that time. He didn't stop there, and during the same session, he would take another 0.02 off of the time before he cut stream. But this wouldn't be the last time the record was lowered that day. Perhaps the most unexpected twist to the story on Bowser's Castle is that a player named Dotman would lower the record after Matthias, except he used the NTSC version to do it. This is impressive for one reason. NTSC runs at a higher frame rate than PAL, which makes lining up mini turbos a lot harder.
Yes! Yes! I did it! I did it! I did it! I did it!
The majority of top players play the game on PAL for this reason, but back in the day, this caused a rift in the community due to the inaccessibility of PAL to North American runners that spilled over into one of the most notorious cheating scandals in Mario Kart history. For Dotman to get an overall record running on the NTSC version is quite impressive, and it was the first overall record on NTSC since Luke Barnard's 43:43 17 years ago. Matthias wouldn't let this one stand for close to that, and beat it the next day, squeezing out more of the new strats with a 43:05. On the 3-lap, Matthias would draw first blood again, lowering Dan's previous record by a frame on the 18th of March. Dan would reclaim this just 2 days later by lowering it by 0.07, and you'd expect the battle for Bowser's Castle to rage on like this. But Weatherton released another video. As if one record frenzy wasn't enough, just 10 days later, Weatherton posted another video that contained the following tech: a further explanation of the Bowser Castle corner jumps and stair section, one ramp strat for Royal Raceway, and a different ramp strat for DKJP, and the biggest game changer, a new jump on Frapp Snowland that saved over a second. Non-shortcut time trials on Frapp Snowland allow players to jump over sections of track marked out of bounds that border the intended path. For the 3-lap, you would jump over the corner by the Mario Snowman, and on the F-lap, you would do a jump by the Yoshi Snowman and the later jump as well. The jump that Weatherton found occurs on the same corner as the Yoshi Snowman, except this time, instead of jumping between the track and an out-of-bounds section, you jump between 2 out-of-bounds hills. It turns out that if you're on the right trajectory, you can jump between 2 hills without triggering the out-of-bounds detection, which allows you to cut even more off of the Yoshi corner. You might be thinking, isn't this a shortcut? And enough members of the community thought the same thing, so a vote was held to determine if it would be allowed in non-shortcut. Going by the precedent set by the earlier jumps over the out-of-bounds sections, the new jump was allowed after the vote, and the records started pouring in almost immediately, with a lot of new faces in the mix. Since you only have to hit it once for the F-lap, that category saw a lot more attention, with 8 new records being set on the 25th alone. Abney would tie it and then lower it 2 times in one stream for a total cut of 0.12, and then Dotman would cut another 10th off the record, again on the NTSC version. Abney wasn't done, however, and he'd set his 3rd untied record on the same stream, with a 37.96, breaking what is likely the last second barrier on the F-lap. Dotman would tie this time on NTSC, but before he could lower it, more records came pouring in. Australian runner Jdeco would take another 0.08 off of Dotman's record, and it was at this time that the 2 players battling for champion would make their mark. Matthias would drive a 37.82, and to finish off the day, Dan would lower that by another .04, making a total of 8 new records on the Frapp Snowland F-lap, the busiest day in its entire history. The 3-lap saw action, but not as much as the F-lap for the simple fact that you had to hit the jump 3 times, which lowered the success rate of completing an attempt. Despite this, Dotman would take .22 off of the record on the 25th of March, lowering an untied record Matthias had set earlier that month. Matthias did strike back, and lowered it on the 27th by .21, and then Dotman and Abney had a brief skirmish, with Abney setting a time of 1:59.04, just .05 away from what is likely the 3-lap's last second barrier. Dan would steadily be grinding attempts on this track, struggling with hitting the new tech, but he developed an audio cue for when to time his jump, and would get the first 1:58 time on April 1st. Just a week later, Matthias would set a 1:58.74, which is where the record stood for the rest of April, and this is where things started to slow down, or so everyone thought. Contrary to how April started, it wouldn't be a busy month when it came to time trials records. Matthias would take the champ title on the 8th and held it for 21 days before Dan reclaimed it at the end of the month. They would trade the title a few more times in early May, with their record count being neck and neck, and as the battle raged, they were setting a lot of ties across many of the tracks. If a tie occurs, both players are recognized as having the world record, with no penalty being applied to the calculation for who is champion. To say this was the most active battle for champ in Mario Kart history is a huge understatement, as not only were the record counts close, the title came close to changing hands more times in 2021 than it had in the previous 24 years of the community's existence. But in 1 week during mid-May, one player would take the title back, in a reign that's still ongoing to this day. Dan had 16 records at the beginning of May, and on the 10th, he started some very long sessions, and within the next 7 days, 10 records would fall to his efforts.
Please, come on, I don't think it's fast enough. Oh my god. That run could have been so much better. But world record tie. Get super nervous. World record, another one, man. Go! Yes! 19! Oh, I can't believe I did that. Nice! Oh my god, lap 3 was so bad. But I did it. Yes! 419!
By the end of May, Dan was sitting at 26 records, which put him just 6 away from completing a full sweep of the time trials leaderboard. June would be a much quieter month, with a lot less activity compared to May, and Dan would do attempts on Choco Mountain when he did find time to stream. July was a bit busier, as Dan picked up 3 different 3-lap records, the Sherbetland 3-lap, the Choco Mountain 3-lap, and the Yoshi Valley 3-lap. It appeared as though he was unstoppable, until the A1A decided to do something about it. The A1A, or Anti-1 Alliance, is a group of players that step up to the challenge of stopping any single player from achieving a sweep of all 32 records, which gives them an average finish of 1, hence the name A1A. The A1A would see some familiar faces in its ranks, with Zoran Tintor once again grinding the DKJP F-lap. In a twist of fate, Matthias, who had previously been a target of the A1A, now found himself aligned with them in an effort to stop Dan from sweeping every record. As for newcomers, we only need to look at Toad's Turnpike, where 2 days after Dan reached 28 records, he would see a competitor tie his F-lap, and his name was Xander. Xander is another time trial player, and one of only 8 people to have the title of Universal God, which is awarded to players that break certain time barriers on each track, in both shortcut and non-shortcut. His tie on Toad's Turnpike F-lap was a shot across the bow for Dan's aspirations of completing the sweep, and just the next day, he lowered it again to untie the record, with a 58.67. So how long do you think this record would stand? A day? A week? The answer was until Dan finished watching Smash Summit 11 that very night. Getting hyped up from the grand finals, Dan would beat Xander's record just a few hours after it was set, shortly after midnight, and then he went to sleep. After waking up, he would start a long session on Koopa Troopa Beach in an attempt to best Matthias's record, which was just a frame ahead of his best time. It took an 8.5-hour stream, but Dan finally tied Matthias's time, bringing his record total to 29, and he now faced a very tough decision. The 3 remaining records he needed were both laps on Moo Farm, which he had never held, and the Kalahari Desert 3-lap. These 2 tracks were some of the hardest to get world records on for several reasons, with countless hours at the top level being sunk into them with no fruit to bear. Since he went for Moo Farm, we'll look at that one first, and while the layout of the track looks simple, it's the only non-shortcut track with RNG present. Allow me to introduce Monty Mole. Scattered along the track are various molehills, with 3 separate clusters along the optimal race line for the track. Each time you go over a hole, there's a 40% chance that a mole will pop up, and with 3 molehills, that means about 1 in 5 runs will complete for the F-lap, with about the same odds for the 3-lap, since a safe strat is used that goes over 0 or 1 moles per lap. With this in mind, Dan decided to optimize his attempts at both records. He started grinding the 3-lap, and on runs where he made a mistake on the first lap before the shroom spot, he would switch to an F-lap attempt on the second lap. Using this strategy, he also decided to stream for 8 hours a day to help mitigate the advantage of the A1A grinding against him. These long streams allowed him to minimize the effects of RNG by maximizing the number of attempts he was doing each day. To Dan's surprise, he tied Abney's record on the F-lap relatively quickly, on just his second day of attempts, but there was one other thing on his mind. He had professional commitments looming in mid-August, so he didn't have time for an extended battle with the A1A. His streams started getting longer in the pursuit of record perfection, and his focus was now on the Moo Farm 3-lap. His reasoning for going after the Moo records first was that if he managed to overcome the RNG, it would create a buffer for him to grind the remaining records, since it was more likely that he would lose other records while grinding on this track. His assumption wasn't incorrect, because the 23rd of July would be a major setback for him, with Matthias untying the Sherbetland 3-lap, and TJL tying the Moo Farm F-lap that Dan had just set. TJL had extensive experience on Moo Farm, having held the F-lap record for the majority of the previous decade, and he had the skill and determination to take this track back from Dan, which would all but kill his chances of completing the sweep. Despite losing one record and having TJL breathing down his neck on another, Dan stuck to the 3-lap, and with each day that went by, he slowly approached the record.
It just happened! Oh my god, yes! Yes! Oh my god. It happened. It happened.
A full week of grinding 8 hours a day, and Dan finally had the most elusive record of his karting career, beating the previous time by a full frame on July 29th. This left 2 records, the Sherbetland 3-lap, and what is perhaps the most technical track of all, the Kalahari Desert 3-lap. Kalahari Desert has 3 difficulties: null tires, the hill hops, and most notorious, the train. There's only a small chance of null tires occurring here, so let's look at the hill hops, as there's something that you have a lot more control over. At the start of Kalahari Desert, there's a small section of hills that are quicker to drive over than staying on the main track. If you drive over them normally, you'll lose speed, so the optimal method is to jump over them as close to the peak of the hill as possible. This makes them a big reset point, as not only can a mistimed hop end up costing you time, but it can also mess up your setup for the second hop. While hill hops can be brutal to grind out on the 3-lap, they aren't the most difficult part of the course. That distinction belongs to the train, as it's directly in your path on the final lap. If you time a mini turbo just right, you can slide between the wheels of the train and get by without losing any time. But if you're a pixel off or have bad timing, you'll crash into the train and have to start again. For these two reasons, Calamari Desert is almost as bad as Moo Moo Farm, and with only a little over a week left before he had to step away from Kart, Dan got to work on tackling this track, but the A1A wasn't going down without a fight. TJL was hard at work on Moo Moo Farm, and Matthias had a very strong start to a stream on Banshee Boardwalk that happened on August 2nd, with one of his first runs coming just 0.18 away from the record. He continued playing, and within the hour, he had another run that was just a single frame from untying the 3-lap. With strong runs coming in, the pressure was on Dan to perform, and as his exit date loomed, he knew that it was now or never. If it didn't happen soon, he might never get another chance. So the grind continued. Dan lost the chance at world record on the final mini turbo of the track. It appeared as though the window was closing on completing the sweep, and on the final day before he had to step away, he knew he had one final shot.
I did it! I did it, I did it, I did it, I did it, I did it. Oh my god, I can't believe I just did it. I did it. I have not even been driving well. Oh my god. Oh, I was so scared right at the end. I did it. I'm on 31. Let's go. 31 out of 32.
With that, he was at 31 out of 32 records for the first time in his career, a feat only Matthias had done before him, and the only track left was Sherbetland 3-lap. You'd think that after grinding for weeks just to get records on 2 tracks, that Dan's story would end with a 31 out of 32. Battling fatigue and the mental wear of fighting the A1A, he put everything he had into the Sherbetland 3-lap. He got on a run. Matthias's record was only 0.02 ahead of his best time. It appeared to be in the bag, and then, just like on Calamari Desert...
Oh my god! Oh my god, I really choked it on the last MT, that is...
Just 15 minutes later, the same thing would happen. It didn't seem like today was going to be Dan's day, but he persevered.
I did it, man. Let's go. 32 out of 32 records. It happened. It's over. It's over. It's over. It's over. Another tie.
With that, Dan became the first person in history to achieve a full sweep of the Mario Kart 64 non-shortcut leaderboard, completing what may possibly be the greatest achievement in all of speedrunning. Thanks for watching.